If you love podcasts about history, check out Canadian Time Machine from the Walrus Lab. Each episode examines the fascinating and complicated stories and issues behind an important anniversary in Canada's past. Season 3 features historians and curators from the Canadian Museum of History and the Canadian War Museum. On this episode of Artefactuality, can we change the culture of the oldest sport at the Winter Olympics? My name is Kim Thuy. On this podcast from the Canadian Museum of History, together we explore what objects and stories from the past can tell us about who we are today. What will resonate tomorrow? How will the events unfolding around us be remembered in the future? Winter Olympic Games, Calgary 1988. 22-year-old Elizabeth Manley glides onto the ice in her bright pink skating dress and waves at the crowd. Elizabeth was an underdog going into these games. Some analysts thought she had no chance of getting on the podium. But Elizabeth went on to give the performance of her life, earning her a silver medal. The result is even more impressive given the pressure she'd been under. A week before the Olympics, an Ottawa newspaper published a piece that doubted Elizabeth's prospects.
It more or less was just saying because I was diagnosed with mental health issues that I wasn't going to be strong enough to win a medal. And in between lines said I was a waste of money for Sport Canada and Skate Canada. Oh, it was absolutely devastating. They took a picture. We had just bought a dog. It was a little puppy. And they took a picture of me with a puppy on my shoulder, and it said, "Manly dog, by inconsistency will never win a medal." And the whole article talked about me having a breakdown, me suffering from mental health, and people feeling that I was inconsistent at competitions.
Six years earlier, Elizabeth had lost a coach who she was very close to. Around the same time, she moved away from her family in Ottawa to train in Lake Placid, New York. The isolation and stress took its toll. Months into her move, Elizabeth lost all of her hair and gained 50 pounds.
In the 80s, we didn't talk about mental health. So when I tried to come out with it and tell the story of the numerous things that happened to me, well, nobody wanted to hear it. They didn't want to put Canada's sweetheart and mental health in the same sentence. And I was diagnosed as depression, anxiety, and having a nervous breakdown, and I physically completely fell apart. Athletes are trained to be tough. And to be tough, you don't have a voice. You stay quiet, you keep things hidden, you don't project any problems that you're going through because you don't want your opponents to know, your competitors to know. And you certainly don't want your organization to know because you've got that spot of the team and you don't want to lose it if there's any hesitation that you're not mentally prepared to compete in an elite athlete sport.
I would say in the newspaper, they brushed over it a little bit.
Chloé Ouellet-Riendeau is the assistant curator of sport history at the Canadian Museum of History.
They didn't really acknowledge that it was depression, and they would really more focus on the physical aspects of the depression, like the gain weight and the hair loss, for example, were the two most aspects that were mentioned by journalists at those times. And they would say, yeah, she's having nervous episodes. That's what they would call it, not necessarily depression.
Chloé wants to help tell Elizabeth's story through an artifact from the '88 Olympics, Elizabeth's Team Canada jacket. It's red and white with stripes on the shoulders and Canada printed in bold letters on the back. The patriotic design is meant to unite and celebrate the athletes on Team Canada. But when it comes to their media coverage, their experiences are divided. Figure skaters are often criticized about their appearance.
This object really is the opportunity to talk about figure skating and all the aesthetics that's around the sport. So just to look at what kind of clothing the figure skaters were wearing in the 1980s, such as this one with Elizabeth Manley, but also to see a kind of progression with today's standards. And it's really an opportunity to look at body image and how we're treating body image in different eras, especially in sports and especially in aesthetic sports, because we do know there's kind of a pressure on elite athletes, but there's like an additional pressure that's put on the body image of aesthetic athletes. And this objects, I think, is a great way of talking about that.
So back in the 80s, what would a reporter write about a figure skater that you wouldn't hear today? What kind of language would they use?
It was very emphasis on the curves, and even with the muscular body, we would criticize it to be maybe too fat. So when there was like 5 pounds too much on a body, we would say it outright, like, oh, look at this figure skater. She's not, or he's not up to the standards of what she used to be. She put on some weight. So they would actually write the number of what her current weight was at the time of the competition, and just saying, for example, she's 133 pounds. She's overweight. Is she going to be able to make it with all these extra pounds on? Instead of focusing on the performance of the body, of what the body was able to do, its ability, it was what did it look like in this tiny, tiny little bodysuit or dresses.
Elizabeth says she channeled her frustration with the media fixation on her weight into her training.
I would take like 2 days where I wouldn't get on my pajamas. I'd sleep all day. I'd eat everything in the fridge. I would just compensate my feelings, right? And then within about 24, 36 hours, all of a sudden I'd get that kind of fire in me. And I'm like, no, I'm going to prove to them. I'm going to do this. So I was able to turn defeats, failures, criticism, judgment. I was able to convert all those into almost a fire to prove everybody wrong.
So when you stepped onto the ice and delivered that silver medal performance, what was going through your mind?
Just that I did it. We've always said this in my family. My medal, yes, it's a silver Olympic medal, but it's a gold medal in life. And I remember standing on that podium that night thinking, I did this for everybody in this country that's ever suffered. And that's a pretty powerful message back in the 80s to realize. But that was the day I made a commitment that I was going to work with people and I was going to help people and I was going to be open about what I went through because I want to help people. And I remember my father saying to me, why would you write a book or why would you want to talk about this? And, I said to my dad, if it helps one person, that's all that matters. That person could be the next Elizabeth Manley. I have things that I do today. Like I challenge myself every day to compliment a stranger because you don't know what they're going through. And sometimes that can get them through a week, it can get them through a month, just getting a compliment. And I might not have stepped on that ice that night if I hadn't had a person that stopped me the day before the long program and called me a champion, a complete stranger. And that changed the whole trajectory of my career because I was so sick in Calgary and I wasn't sure if I was going to get through that last event. And there was a hockey coach from Canada. I didn't know him at all. And he called me a champion. And that's all it took. He empowered me with just 2 words. And I went out the next night and won that night. And I realized the power of words, how important they are. And we all need to do that in a society today. We have to understand our words can really affect somebody or they can really propel somebody.
Mm-hmm. And have you met that person again?
Oh, I did. I hadn't seen him forever. And it's got to be about 10 years now. I was invited to speak in Calgary. And halfway through my speech, the lady got up on the stage and she goes, I want you to turn around. And they had him zoomed in on a screen behind me. He had no idea, Kim, the impact he had on me that day when he ran into me before the long program. And he had tears running down his cheeks. And he said, I had no idea, me running into you for 2 minutes, that I changed your entire life. And I said, you did. And so I had that opportunity to like wholeheartedly thank him, that he really made Elizabeth Manley get out there.
So you've been a mental health advocate for many years and have been generous in sharing your own struggles and how you overcame them. In the last few years, we've seen a number of high-profile athletes talk publicly about their own battles with mental health. What do you think of the way these athletes, Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, and Michael Phelps, to name a few, have been treated by the media and sport fans?
First of all, I'm very proud of them. I'm very proud that they've taken a stand. I'm so grateful now that we're seeing more athletes have that guts to come out and say, this is what I'm going through, and this is what's happened, and I need to take a step back. And what I'm seeing, and it's taken so long, I mean, it's, 34 years, 35 years since the Calgary Olympics. It's taken this long for organizations and media to understand this is real. This isn't something that we can just say, well, we're going to take them off the team because they're having problems. They're helping these athletes now. They're working with them. And I am so excited because in a small way, I'm hoping I was a part of it by being one of those athletes that just came out and said, this is what's going on and this needs to change and this needs to happen. And I remember the big one that happened was Simone Biles.
Simone Biles is one of the greatest gymnasts of all time. She withdrew from several events in the 2020 Summer Olympics in Tokyo. Simone experienced a sudden loss of focus and confidence. She took time off to work on her mental health before eventually returning to competition.
I had so much respect for her because she was in the middle of a games when she did it. She said, I can't do it. And you know what? The world supported her, and that warmed my heart because that's what we need. And you look at Simone Biles now, and she's better than she's ever been. So, I'm just really happy to see that we're having the conversation. We're talking about it. Goodness gracious, I don't want to see athletes go through what a lot of us have gone through, but at least they're aware and they can catch those signs that maybe something is happening. Because if you're not in a mentally good place, you're not going to compete well.
These days, you're a registered life coach and you train figure skaters as well as hockey players. How do you incorporate mental health into your training?
So I have a lot of parents that question me on that because when I'll start a session with a kid, I will take 5, if need be 10, if need be 15 minutes. And I will talk with them before we even start anything, because I want them to feel in a safe place with me. And I want to see how their day is going. Did something happen at school? Did something happen before you got to the rink? Did something happen in the locker room? And it gives them kind of an outlet to release some of the things that they're not feeling great about. And I tell you, Kim, when they open up, the work ethic I get out of them after that is priceless. It is, because they've released these emotions and now they're ready to focus in on their training. I can usually tell by a kid when they come over to me, they're not having a good day. So I will stop the lesson and say, what's going on? And because they know my story, they feel safe and they can talk to me. And I get such great work out of them after that. And so when the parents come up and say, you were talking for 10 minutes, what was going on? And I said, it's part of the training.
So in 2020, Skate Canada released guidelines focused on body positivity. What do you think of what the organization is trying to accomplish?
To have healthier athletes. Not only have they gone the mental health way, but with the body image, it's gotten to that point where in multiple sports, gymnastics, ballet, a lot of sports, there's still issues with body image. And then athletes taking the wrong routes to be the way they think they need to be. I mean, I worked with an ice show for 3 full years. I did 1,200 shows, and I was weighed every week. And if I gained 1 pound, I was fined. And if I didn't lose that weight that I had gained within 2 weeks, I'd be fired. There's a perfect example of how athletes or performers feel that they have to look, and they go to extremes to make that weight or to look that way. And, I went through that my whole career, Kim. Like, I used to have people call my agent and say, well, what does she look like right now? I'm only 4'11" and I have a lot of muscle. So if I did put on some weight, I did look a little heavier. But the first question that would come out of everybody's mouth is, what does she look like? And that's where we really need to put the bathtub plug into that way of thinking. Even back in my day, Skate Canada would spontaneously show up to my rink just to see what my weight looked like. And I think we need to recognize that goes on in the sporting world. And it's in multiple sports. I've talked to a luge girl that was criticized for her weight. I've talked to gymnasts. I've talked to downhill skiers, and the whole thing about weight categories in sports, right? We've just got to let the athletes be athletes.
Chloé Wallet-Riendeau says these Skate Canada guidelines signal a big step towards changing the culture of figure skating.
They really introduce these guidelines to promote healthy practices and behaviors when working with athletes. So the guidelines are really put forward for the coaches, for anyone that's in the vicinity of the athletes, on how to help them and use language and practices and behaviors that are going to make sure that the athletes are protected. So these efforts really aim to protect and to prevent dropouts, because we know, especially among girls who are most likely to leave sports by late adolescence, mental health and body image is a really key factor of why a lot of them decide to drop out, because the pressure is just too much and they have to take care of themselves. So by putting guidelines there in the sport itself and having people know how to act and how to be a positive person in the athletes' lives, we're hoping that they'll stay in the sport that they love practicing.
So despite efforts to be more thoughtful about language, how often do you think figure skaters still hear coaches or reporters use words like fat or thin to describe their physique?
I think it's still present, even if there's guidelines there, because there are some studies that did ask recently retired figure skaters their experience in the sport. And still, they had a lot of focus on their weight and their appearance. And a lot of them talked about that it led them to disordered eating, and it led them to injuries, because if you're not nourishing your body properly because of appearance expectations, there's physical aspects to it too. And of course, long-term mental health issues among those female athletes. And there's another study in 2021 that have shown that female athletes in aesthetic sports experience emotional abuse through body shaming. So they've compared the consequences of this body image shaming to symptoms resembling post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's still prevalent today.
Given that figure skating is a sport where athletes are judged on their aesthetic performance, it's not surprising that skaters can become preoccupied with their physique, right? But is it possible to help them avoid that?
Yes, it's possible if the sport itself and the organizations and the people that surround these athletes help them and change their vocabulary, change the way that they talk about the body, focus more on the ability of the body, what it can do, and less so on its appearance.
What kind of conversations do you hope this artifact from Elizabeth Manley, this jacket, can inspire in museum visitors?
At the museum, what we're trying to do when telling sports stories is really to go beyond just the statistics, the wins and the failures. We want to go beyond and say that sports is part of Canadian culture. And even if you're not an athlete yourself, you can see yourself in this story of Elizabeth Manley. So by looking at this object, you can see how other people have had mental struggles and are still having them, but that the conversation is shifting and that can help you be part of that shift.
And what does Elizabeth Manley hope people will see?
That jacket was on a young girl who was told she was never going to do anything. And that jacket made it to one of the greatest moments in sports history.
Thank you to Elizabeth Manley, a two-time Canadian Olympian and silver medalist in figure skating at the 1988 Olympics. Thanks as well to Chloé Ouellette-Riendeau, the Assistant Curator of Sport History at the Canadian Museum of History. Thanks for listening to Artifactuality, a podcast from the Canadian Museum of History. I'm Kim Thuy. Artifactuality is produced by Antica Productions. Anne Lang is our producer. Subin Kim is the researcher. Laura Raguer and Stuart Cox are executive producers at Antica. Mixing and sound design by Alain Derbez. Jenny Ellison, Robin Jeffrey, and Steve McCullough of the Canadian Museum of History are the executive producers of this podcast. Check out historymuseum.ca for more stories, articles, and exhibitions from the museum. For more information about Elizabeth Manley's Team Canada jacket, check out the links in our show notes.